Hey guys, and welcome back to the Forge. Man, look here. It has been a very long time since we've been back in the shop in this format. We've got the big cameras out. It has been a minute. I hope you guys liked our lead up with our work in doing the brooms inside the nice AC leather room, but now we're back here in the Forge and doing some awesome stuff. Now we had a bit of a conundrum trying to figure out what we wanted to film, because in our absence from the YouTubes, man, there have been so many other great creators that have been out there making really fine content. Black Bear has been at it for a couple years now, and Mr. John has done a stunning job of getting great content out there. And I mean, again, he's doing super awesome. Torbjorn across the pond has done such a fantastic job of really doing like art films with blacksmithing. I mean, there's just so many great creators out there at this point. I feel like I'm kind of behind the gun. But one of the things that they keep saying is that there's still a lot of people getting into the craft, and people want basic things that they can put on their table. So we figured that this series would be that. Now, in the past, man, we've done barbecue forks. I mean, we were out there on the ground doing a lot of that basic material. So I don't want to have to go back and reshoot that stuff, though I know you guys would like to see it. But I said, well, we're going to revisit some of the basic items, but we are going to do them a little bit fancier so that maybe we can actually promote a little bit of extra craftsmanship at the same time if we've got some new guys coming in, seeing what you can do just with your anvil and what you can put on your table to sell. So today we're going to be redoing the barbecue fork, but we're going to be doing a super fancy barbecue fork. So this is a leftover piece of scrap. This is 1 inch by 1/4 inch. I'll be able to show you guys right here what happens. As you can actually see, this is a leftover piece that I have used in one of my previous projects. So we are in fact using scrap material. Inch by 1/4 is not small stuff. In fact, to be able to actually bring out the shank like I'm going to want to, boy, it's going to be quite a bit of effort. And it is warm out here, and I am in full regalia. So over the course of this video, you're going to see me sweat a little bit, but that's our stock. And so let's go ahead and get cranking. So for this project, there's going to be a couple of advanced tools that can help you absolutely hands down. This is a spring swage. You guys have absolutely seen one of these, but when you are making things like a fork, so the first portion we're going to do, we're going to have to split the metal that's going to be for the tines, but right behind that split, we've got to neck it down to make the actual shank of the fork. And in that transition space, you cannot beat a tool like this. No matter how good you are with the hammer, you're not going to get a good neck unless you use something like this. Now, of course, the spring swage was designed for you to be able to work alone. Back in the day, they'd have had a top tool and a bottom tool, and you'd have had to have a buddy actually working the hammer for you while you held the two different tools. But this guy does the job very well. So over the course of these videos, you know, there's always this fight with me because I want to show you how to do it with the super basic tools, but that's been done. A little bit more advanced tools make a huge difference in the quality of work that you can turn out. And of course, if you're going to be a craftsman, there have to be standards. You can absolutely learn. You should get out there and learn. But as you start to progress in your work, the first thing you should be concerned with is tooling. And I want to give you guys just a basic idea of those tools that you really need to make good quality products. So spring swage is going to be one of those that you need to make soon, quickly, the sooner the better. All right, guys, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to separate this guy out here so that we have our material for our fork itself. Now, see that? See how nice and even that is? Almost impossible to do with just hammer and anvil, but that little section right there will make the difference between an attractive looking product and one that looks a little bit more like poo-poo. So I'm going to take my ears off. I'll go right back in, clean it up, and now we're going to be ready to actually start our split. So we'll take another heat, and then we're going to use our hold fast to actually pin this to our anvil and start the split with our chisel. So our second tool we're going to be using, of course, is going to be our holdfast. If you guys haven't seen one of these, this piece actually fits down into the Pritchell hole and it jams itself in. So if you've got a piece of metal that you're trying to manipulate with a chisel or some other punching tool, you can actually pin that material to the top of the anvil. So we're going to use this because I'm going to be using my chisel to go through and cut that piece out. And if I don't have it pinned, man, it's going everywhere. So either I'm going to set something on fire where it's myself or some portion of the shop. So use a holdfast. Now guys, one of the things, I am doing this on a cutting plate. Set that right there. She is held in place firmly, and let's start to cut. Now I want to get her nice and centered up. Now I'm not going crazy with this first one. I'm just trying to get her properly centered or close to it. Now the great thing about using steel that this is this thick, we can kind of screw up a lot here and still save it because we got plenty of material that we can cut away. So I'm just taking basically a marking line right there, and you guys can see we've got a reasonably straight, and I do say reasonably straight line. So we'll go back, take another heat, and then we'll come back and start cutting in earnest. All right, here we go for our second round. Again, set that right there in place. Make sure we're held very steadily. Now you can't see it, but I've got a can of water right behind the anvil. So what I'm doing, of course, is I am making an effort to keep my chisel cold. Now the key with a lot of this is you can be patient with it. And usually for something that's a 1/4 inch over this length, usually 3 or 4 heats is usually where I end up. Okay, and one more time back into the fire. Coming out for our third heat. Now she's opening up pretty well here. Excellent, primo good. So there is our split. Now there's a couple different sequences you can do this in. I generally prefer putting the neck in first before I end up coming in to split all this stuff. You can just leave it whole and then split it afterwards, but just for frame of reference, I generally prefer this method. Lots of different ways though. Now one quick thing, you'll notice that this is a piece of scrap metal, and in general when I'm doing my work, I don't use shorter pieces because I have to use them with tongs. I always prefer to be able to have my work self-handled than having to use an intermediate. For this, I can get away. I'm actually cooling the backside of it so I can handle it by its own self. Otherwise, I'd have to use a longer pair of tongs, and if you're doing in that close work, it can be a little bit cumbersome. So given the preference, this is what I do. Now one of the great things about metal, I always love doing these forks like this because you get to kind of move pieces out of the way. So to work on that tine, I get to move that one just right out of the freaking way. That is just the coolest stuff for me. Now if you cut this by hand, you're going to have a bit of a wedge. So you got to be careful on those first blows. You don't want to fold that lip over so you make a cold shot. And you can see that we're pulling out that first tine there. And like I said, again, this is 1/4 inch. So the great thing about working with a heavier material is there's way less chance of burning this. So you've got some forgiveness in there, but buddy, you are going to have to put a little bit of extra elbow grease to make this do what you need it to do. I'm going to tell you from a wardrobe perspective, we have had the biggest time. So these shirts, right? So I don't want it hanging open like I'm, you know, from the 70s in a porno, but I also don't want to hook it all the way up here so I look like I'm a, you know, a waiter at the local restaurant. For some reason, most of these shirts we buy don't have a button in a reasonable place, and I keep fidgeting with it. It's terrible. Here we come for our next heat. All right, now we're going to come to a bit of a crossroads here because you see how thick that is up top. Most of the time when you're doing these tines, you're not really going to want it that super thick. So you're going to have to spread things out to be able to get down into to thin it so it looks a little bit nicer. But to do that, I'm going to have to come here behind this neck and thin that out a little bit so it's not so much in the way and I can get down in there. And if all of that seems out of order, you know I'm just making this crap up as I go, right? I haven't done one of this type of work in years. So I am attempting to give the illusion of I know what I'm doing when I'm just winging it. It's hot out here, guys, so my brains aren't working well. All right, let's go to work on our neck here, just to give myself a little bit of working room. Make sure and flip your piece over. Ow! That's a piece of slag is what that is. You get that sound effect for free. We don't even have to pay YouTube for that sound effect. Now we're looking a little bit better and we got some working room, so let's take one more heat. Now that I've bought myself a little bit more working space, I'm going to start opening this piece up a bit. And now I can go ahead and pull it all the way out to 180 degrees, and you guys can see I can really get in there and start working those tines properly now. Notice how it's wanting to twist because we've got that bevel sitting there. So what I'm doing is I'm coming in at an angle to try to counteract that bevel. Okay. All right. This is not too terrible bad. Now, a word to the wise, when you're doing things like forks and pointy objects, when you put it back into your coal fire, now if you're working gas, you'll be fine. But when you're working a coal fire, there's a tendency to put that spiky tip down into the fire lower than everything else. And if you do that, as they say, you're gonna have a bad time. The thinner those pieces become, the faster they heat. And especially if you're using coal, you will melt that tip off very, very quickly. So as a rule of thumb, don't ever try to put the piece down into the fire. Try to make sure that it's flat and on an even plane with everything else. Okay. Now guys, I'm actually showing you a buffet of the techniques that I use when doing this particular work. All right, now you guys can see we've got a really nice We got a really nice split there, and I'm just going to continue working these tines out. And now you can go super fancy with these. You can pull these out to all the same thickness. There are so many different things that you can do on that end of it to keep these relatively in line. Now, one thing I do want to point out is if you look at this anvil, we recently had rebuilt it, and I have not put that rounded shoulder on there yet. And if you want to know why you have the rounded shoulder, if you will look, you can see how sharp that bite is as I roll it across there, and that's not good. What you want to end up doing is being able to have that nice rounded corner for doing bends just like I'm doing here. On most anvils, working anvils, you're going to find the first 2 or 3 inches do have that rounded corner for doing this type of shouldering work. So this year here at Georgia, not only is it hot, I'm starting to sweat here. The great news is because we're in the shop, that's a good thing, because out there are what we call South Georgia gnats. And we have a particular type of bug. The South Georgia gnat is famous. It really only exists from the bottom of Georgia up to Macon, where we have something that we literally call the gnat line. And these are annoying bugs. They don't bite, but they are hell-bent to enter any available orifice that you may present. And they are bad out there. Usually they buzz around and circle, but we've got some bombardier gnats this year, and I am so glad to be in here. I'd rather sweat than have them going up my nose. Now, one of the biggest problems that I usually end up with doing this type of tapering is it's very easy to get that piece out of square, and it goes into what we call the rhombozoid. So be very careful as you're working. If this piece gets out of square, make sure and go to your edges and correct it, because that's how you get a really bad cold shut. So we're looking pretty good there. I'm going to take a heat on this side, and I'm going to have to pull a little bit of beef out of this one to kind of match it over here. I'm just sweating a bit. It is warm. That's pretty darn nice right there, if I do say so myself. Now, one thing I want to tell you guys is, if you notice now, I've got years of experience on here, so my pieces are pretty even. They are pretty neat. But I'm telling for you guys, don't be afraid to overforce. Don't be afraid to bring that guy on out and then cut back so it can fit. It does not have to be flawlessly perfect with material available. So make sure that, if you're starting, start with more than you need so that you can cut some off and make something fit. I think one of the biggest things that when I was starting blacksmithing, there was a problem in my brain where if you started with this size stock, that was it. It had to be perfect. You had to use that material, and that's what made it good. And starting with consistent stock size is important, but a lot of these guys that were getting these beautifully long forged pieces, they weren't forging it to that size. They were making one the way that they wanted it, and then the other one would have extra material, and to make it right, they just cut it off until they got it right. So don't be tied to not manipulating the material by removing some, and because I'm going to tell you something, the number of fork tines that have been lopsided, like whole, like walleyes, it is just uncountable. The way I solve it, I go with the grinder. If I've got an extra inch of material, just turn the grinder on and your problem is solved. All right. So now we've got this all nice and squared up, but I don't want square tines. I want round tines. So I'll very carefully come in here and start working these into the round, and then we'll move them forward. Again, be very mindful of how you put this in the fire. Those thin tips will meet. They'll meet. They will meet their demise by melting. That's what I meant to say. That's how you recover bad grammar and the heat starting to affect me. So when you're taking these edges off, don't kill it. Just get in there and tippy tap. Work them down real easy. Even when you're doing this and you're rounding these edges, especially on that tip, if you're not careful, you can make a cold shut. So, little tippy taps. And even right here in this centerpiece, little tippy taps. Now you're going to see a problem here because as I'm working that edge, that backside, you can see it's getting chewed up pretty bad. So that's why we have that rounded edge. And probably after this video, I'm going to come back in and clean that up so that I don't get that sharp edge anymore. All right, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, check that out. That's pretty darn nice. I am very happy with this. So we've got very nice rounded tines. They seem to be of appropriate length. There's a very similar taper. There is just absolutely nothing to be unhappy with right there. So let's take one more heat, and we're going to bend these back straight. And now we're not going to end up finishing this. We're just going to get them out of the way, kind of sort of where they need to be as we work the rest of our fork. So guys, we're going to come over our horn right here. Now the trick to doing this is make sure and flip it around, tippy taps. Slowly bring it over. If you just start wailing on one side, it's going to bend it to that side, and you're going to have a monkey of a time getting it back right. But check that out. That's looking pretty good. Again, we'll come back in and we'll finish shaping these tines before we're done. But that gets them forward and out of the way. So now that we can start working on the shank of our fork. So now, since I'm going to be working on the shank here, I'm going to use the tongs to get the heat there. Now here's where you come into a question. Because for me, I like a super thin tapered shank. It just really looks good. One of the general rules I try to do is I try to make sure that the finished piece doesn't look like the stock that it came from. Now that usually means a lot more work and a lot more manipulation, but in the end, it really looks good because we can leave that front just like it is and do our handle, and there's plenty of room for decoration, and it will be an excellent fork. So if you're just starting out, you can do that. But today, we're gluttons for punishment. So we're going to come in, thin this out, spread our handle a little bit, and we're really going to manipulate this material. So let me put her in our lock rings here, and let's bring her up to heat. All right, here we go. Looking good there. You can see she's looking pretty good. But now look, you can see how this is thickened up right here. There's no reason you can't leave that in place if it gives you the line that you want. And that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to clean it up just a little bit, and I'm going to come in. I'm going to knock the sharp corners off this taper. And this is where it gets a little tough because she'll want to slide on you. So you can use a top tool in the hardy hold to act as a backstop if you like. I'm just going to lightly tippy tap. And you can see now she is nicely rounded and looks forged and looks good. All right, so now I've got a nice sloping curve. She looks really nice. I'm very happy with this. So now we're going to flip her around because now we're going to need to do the actual tail end of this hook before we get into finishing out our handle itself. So let me slip her around. Slip her around, flip her around. What are the first signs of heat exhaustion?
Stop running. So you're not there yet.
I'm not there yet, guys. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our spring swage because I'm going to make a very sharp shoulder so that we can make our hook for the end of the fork. Again, you can taper this out, but it just doesn't look as good as that nice, clean, crisp transition using, wow, that was terrible. It just does not make that very clean, clear, crisp transition to the hook that I want it to do. Don't worry, folks, I'll get back in the hang of this. It's just been a while. My words and brain don't think all good. Once again, there's our spring swage. All right, she's going to come in. I'm going to give myself about an inch of material. Again, don't be so aggressive that you cause a fold over in the material. But look what a nice, clean, clear, crisp transition. So let's take a heat and we'll draw this out. All right, guys, here we go. Make sure, again, to work it evenly from both sides. It does matter when doing this. If you only work it from one side, it'll get off center, and then you're just going to have problems. There's the end of our first heat, and looking pretty good. Now this is where the horn of the anvil can come in handy. That little radius allows you to move material a lot faster. So when I'm drawing out this way, I'll use that horn. But got to be careful because you can hit that nice shoulder and mess it up. So be mindful when you're using the horn to do that. Looking pretty good. Again, very carefully coming in there, nestling up to that shoulder. Looking good. And we're getting there. Maybe 1-2 more heats, and that should be pulled out into what I'm after. All right, that's looking reasonably nice and square. So I'm gonna come in here and clean her up and try to even everything out as much as possible. I don't want any high spots or low spots. So yeah, oh, that's looking good. So now what I'll do is come in, and I don't want to leave that square. Of course, I want to make that round. So we'll take another heat and come knock those edges off. Now for this, I'm not going to superheat it here. I'm only going to take about maybe 1800 degrees. I don't want this gooey. I want it to be able to support itself as I'm knocking those edges off. So I tend to undershoot the heat. It just makes it a little easier. It doesn't go as wonky as it does if it's super hot. And look at there, we are looking pretty darn good. Okay, all right. So now I'm not going to turn this into a hook just yet. I want to end up doing a little bit of decoration here on the handle. You can still see that leftover texturing from the previous project is pretty cool looking. So I'm just going to enhance this just a tad bit with my chisels, because I got a cool story to tell about my chisels. And then we're going to make our hook, and we're going to start cleaning this bad boy up. Okay. So these are chisels from Big Blue. That's the pneumatic hammer company that had the hammers on Forged in Fire. And also, when I was a host of Master of Arms, they also supplied one of the hammers for the show. And they also supplied a number of these tools. So now, I don't know if you know how reality TV works, but once they strike the set, like everything either goes into storage or it just goes away. And so I didn't think we were going to get a second season of the show, which we didn't, but that meant that there was an entire studio set that was filled with handle materials and tools and stuff like that. So I had cargo pants on, and I walked in there on set, and when I walked out of set, I looked like I had MC Hammer pants on. I think my luggage, I had a Pelican case for luggage, and I think it was well over 120 pounds. And every time you set it down, it said, so thank you, Big Blue, for your ill-gotten chisels. These things have been really good. So if you guys would like to buy a good set of chisels, I believe these are made out of H13. These have been in my shop ever since Master of Arms at this point, and they have been excellent chisels. So please, I highly encourage you not to steal Big Blue's chisels like I did, but please purchase them. They are great tools. So I don't need a cut plate under this, since I'm just going to be chiseling the surface and not cutting all the way through. I'm going to take this, this guy right here, and we're just going to add some stuff to the edge. Now the cool thing about these chisels, and especially if you do this on the edge, you really want that metal to deform and do something. You just don't want to, like, you know, stamp a Hello Kitty mark in there. You want that metal to move. You want somebody to see that the material moves like clay. That's the good stuff. Did I mention these are great chisels? I got an eyeball punch here, which is super cool, so I'm just going to come right here in the middle. Okay. Looking pretty good. Looking pretty good. In fact, I'm going to take one more heat. I'm going to, I don't know, that's pretty good. How about some stippling? How about a mysterious 3-dot pattern that the ancient Incans used to use? Nobody knows why. Probably ancient aliens. And I feel like one needs to go here. And I feel like one needs to go here. And I think we have unlocked a symbol of eternal life. Here we go. So now we're ready to start putting the finishing touches on this. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make the hook for hanging this bad boy. It is super thin, so I'm going to have to be super careful. This will overheat very easily. A pair of needle nose or scrolling tongs will do a great job to start this out. I'm not going to use those. I'm actually going to do this over the anvil so you guys can see. But this is where you have to be super ticky. And I do not want to do this holding it by the tongs. You just don't have the control. So I'm going to cool down that front side. Now this is also one of the advantages of having a coal forge. You can actually put your hands on a shorter piece of metal, whereas with a gas forge there's so much excess heat, you can't do this. It's one of my favorite things about using a gas forge. Excuse me, a coal forge. All right, I'm going to come over and just start to tippy tap. I'm going to coax it back. So this can be done well with a hammer. It's just really tough. All right. We're going to take a heat, do a little more bending. Okay, now let's see if I remember how to make a hook. We are going to take almost a 90 right there, and then come over to the horn of the anvil. Now, watch this. I'm going to take that rat tail, I'm going to dip it in water so that I can hammer on it and it won't mess it up. Now you still don't want to go nuts with it. Now you can see that's a little off. No problem. That's why we beat on things. We're going to center this up just a little bit more. And there we go. That looks like it's good enough for government work. Yeah. I'm going to take a heat, one more heat here on the handle because I want to put my touch mark on here, and then we're going to work our way down here to our tines, and we'll be good to go. So we're going to come out, make sure I got my stamp lined up the right way, walk it to where I need it, and symbol of quality right there. So she's looking good. All right, I'm going to make sure she's within tolerance, and I'm going to cool the back side of this after I make sure she's good and straight. And then we're going to go work on our tines, and that should finish her up. Now these tines are already pretty good. I am not going to mess with them too much. I just want to give them a little soft curve over the horn of the anvil, and we're going to call that good. You know, as creatives, sometimes we don't know when to stop screwing with things. So, you know, try to undershoot that a little bit. All right, I'm going to come to the horn of the anvil, and I'm just going to give them just a tad bit of curve. It's looking good. Now you can see one's gotten off, they're not flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the heel of the anvil, and because I've got a wide enough space, I can actually use the heel as a flat. Oh man, look at there. That's looking pretty darn good. I want a little bit of down curve right there. Oh yeah, that's feeling all kinds of stabby, ladies and gentlemen. Nice and even. Now evener. And I think she's ready to be cleaned up, everybody. Okay. And guys, there you have it. One super fancy, super extra heavy duty barbecue fork. Boy, these tines are, buddy, you could just club somebody to death with this bad boy. Now, this of course is not the fanciest barbecue fork that I've ever seen, but it does add a little bit extra and it looks interesting. Now, even our production barbecue forks don't look this good. And so when you're out there and you're looking to sell stuff, unfortunately, you're kind of coming in, well, fortunately and unfortunately, you're coming in on a bit of a renaissance in the blacksmithing deal. So just doing kind of a cruddy fork that is not going to make all the money. So you've got to go a bit above and beyond and really put some craftsmanship and some individuality into your pieces if you want them to sell. So again, super cool piece made out of scrap with mostly basic tools, and that's a pretty fair, reasonable medium. So guys, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you being here. Please, please, please understand that this entire renaissance here for 2025 is being brought to you by the generous support of our Patreons. And this fork is actually going to go to one lucky Patreon there. So if you haven't checked it out, we have some free content over there, and we have a lot of behind the scenes as well. So if you enjoyed this promotion, this video, this awesome wangy bangy thing, please consider going over to Patreon Purgatory Ironworks, and I'll see you guys in the next video.